Greetings, my name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, licensed presenters, the Corner Core, my patrons, anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor or student. Just 3 things on my list today. Welcome New Students is the first title, and that's really based on my Facebook broadcast yesterday. I had 3 people listening and I had no idea who they were or where they came from. And yet I sensed that because they were there and they were listening, I assumed that they were learning, new students. And new to me as students, and students as a general assumption based not only on what I'm presenting, but insofar as it takes a student of Pilates to be willing to learn something about Pilates. And so it was fun having new viewers. Okay, so then my number 2 title is Pilates is just a word. Pilates is just a word. Now, what Pilates means to you will always be unique and specific and treasured, and however you want to describe it, but your relationship to Pilates will always be unique to you, as it is for every human being. But I say that what it is in and of itself will always be universal. See, so MMP thinks that there's an essence within the original work, and that essence will always be what it is. It will be universal, no matter what you make of it individually. So I heard a phrase that I've heard before, but haven't in a while and not since Pilates, that there are people out there that trade on his name, that trade off his name, right? That trade off of his name. They trade off of his name, meaning they make money off of his name. But within that spectrum I talk about a lot, between Pilates having an essence of its own and Pilates having no essence of its own. So much of the trade is enabled to the extent that Pilates doesn't have an essence of its own, so that you can trade off the name without paying any attention to whatever that name might mean, other than whatever anyone makes up of it on their own. Because there is no essence. Recognize the spectrum. Recognize that a whole lot of trading is going on off of his name, and that so little of it has to do with the source of that name being so familiar around the world. So then 3, I have the one title and then like 5 things to say about this. One title. The title is a question. What does Joe mean in the title of his book when he says, Return to Life Through Contrology is the complete title to his book. But what is he talking about if he's saying return to life through Contrology? So, 300. There. 310 would be next. In reflecting on that question, or reflecting on Joe's words, really, return to life, one line of consideration would be Joe as a survivor, would be Joe as connected to Schiller, the German philosopher, who himself refers to Joe, Schiller, and the character in Schiller's play, The Death of Wallenstein. So Schiller was known not to be in good health. At least that's what I understand. Somebody might rise up and say, oh no, you're wrong or whatever, but the folklore that I know is that the author of the play, out of which comes the quote, "Es ist dem Geist, es ist dem Körper bau." It is the soul which builds itself a body. That's the translation by the person that translated the whole play. In any event, it's the poor health as a theme. And with Joe having had rickets and asthma and challenges, this whole thing of surviving isn't about surviving at just normal, optimal health and well-being. You know, we talk about a normal, healthy body that you address in teaching Pilates to, right? But in terms of Joe's history and what does return to life mean, it means, to me, return to a healthier state of life than wherever you were, further away from it than you are now. Get healthy. Get strong. Overcome not only injury, but sickness and challenge. So, right. Joe was a survivor, and his method is survival training. And what does it take to survive? See, in terms of return to life and surviving, what does it take to survive? Well, one way you might look at it is that you have to fit in. You have to fit in to survive. If you stand on a tall building and decide you're going to fly, then the world that you're in may give you disappointing results about your capabilities or your surviving. You believe you'll survive it and you don't. Right? So to some extent you have to fit into the reality that you find yourself in, most notably gravity, most easily notable gravity. You have to fit in. So you have to fit into the physics in which you're trying to survive. And then you have to fit into the biology in which you survive. You're a human biology, you're a human being. And you have to be able to survive in that. And then your behavior is a realm in which you have to be able to survive in. And in terms of behavior, because of recent conversation, you have to be able to survive in your thinking world, in your mental world. And in all of those ways of fitting in, we're talking about acknowledging reality, getting real as an expression, or dealing with it. How do you cope? How do you cope? And which took me wanting to explain personally that what I get out of Pilates, the doing of Pilates, is the peace that comes from finding a coordination of my being, my thinking, and my observing. I come into a better state of presence, a calmer state of who I am and the situation I'm in, and my ability to respond to that situation. And so then again, from correspondence elsewhere, so what inspires so consistently? If you look at Joseph Pilates and his life, and the fact that he documented by his own work the performance of the mat, same exercises, same order, same sequence, 40 years apart within his career, right? That's the point that I place significance on in terms of why is the sequence so important, so pivotal, so foundational to whatever Pilates is, because that sequence Joe documented consistently throughout his career. See, but that's only the expression of his inspiration, right? What's the source of the inspiration? I think that's a good question. And I can only answer it from a personal point of view, as anyone can probably. But a passion that has been a fountainhead for me is what it is, and the meaning that what? I think it's a recognition of something that is perceived as a recognition, whether it's real or not, delusional or true or somewhere in that gray area in between. But it's what you recognize. I'm speaking in my example, what I recognize as the truth of the matter that I try to relate by pointing out the two identifications that I've been consistently focused on throughout the course of my career. And is it a willful thing? It's too good not to illuminate. It's too important not to share as much as I can while I can. So, all I can do in my effort is try to point to something that actually has an experience attached to it. So, when you not only can imagine or know about core new tension, and based on what you know about it, and using your imagination engage in it, to the extent that you then come to a sensation, that's knowledge that's reinforced by your sensation, or it helps as a Pilates instructor. Because my next point in my explanation of what does Joe mean by return to life, the point is the perception. And by that I mean that the perception, the observing, right? The listening to your senses, the engagement of a coordination between being, thinking, and observing That's what I'm after as an instructor, and the point is the perception, to me. Not just that they do what I tell them to do, and that I know they'll be better just from the mechanics of what they're doing. My job as a Pilates instructor, even if I don't try to teach them anything, even if I don't engage their brain in any thinking beyond what? Beyond pointing to the ideal that they're reaching for and engaging their thinking in the pursuit of that ideal, and directing the thinking as to what to listen for in their sensation to inform their movement. So the point is the perception. And again, according to a question about what camp I'm in, whether it's neutral spine or flat spine. And if you don't understand this conversation, it's a popular bone to chew among different points of view. I'm pretty sure, I am sure, it was in Rio de Janeiro where I was doing a workshop. And other than establishing rapport with everyone without speaking a word of a language, I went around and had everybody grip a towel like this, and I would pull it out, and then I would have them make a curled grip, and I would make a pull, making a difference in sensation about a grip that's like this, between a grip that's like this. And then when my translator showed up, it was such a relief, but I already had rapport with them, and I had a teaching moment, instructing moment really, because I wanted them to do this, and then I wanted to do that, and feel the difference between the two. Setting the stage for establishing that the core is a grip at the hips. But then once the translator shows up, it turns out there's at least 3 or 4 tribes of lineages within the room. And within the room, and within those lineages, there are starkly contrasting points of view about things like neutral spine versus flat spine. Breathing, and on the inhale or the exhale, and when and how. All kinds of things. Where someone has been taught in a particular style that conflicts with someone else's style, and yet both of their styles are straight from the heart of the lineage, and they want to know which one is right. Because camps are organized groups, and organized groups then make distinction in that, and thereby feel they need to defend whatever the group is. So let me see if I can make a decent comment about this. In MMP, what's the target? What are we aiming at? Control. Why? Because that's the name of his method. Because Joe says return to life this way, through contrology. And so control, expressing control, is the mean to which to return to life which to me is a reflection on knowing what it's like not to be healthy, or not to be full of life and vigor and vim and vigor, but to be challenged in the quality of your life, or right, to be suffering. And so how do you return to life? How do you return to living where whatever you want to do in your living, which is what Jennifer made the point about, Joe wants you to be able to do anything. Return to life. As though there are no restrictions, or there at least isn't any what? Any pain. So, when it comes to neutral or flat spine, straight spine or neutral spine, anyone who sees how the body engages itself could almost intuitively tell that this engagement between these endpoints is strongest when both of the grips are strongest. And so I know I'm headed toward the ideal engagement of core new tension, which to me reflects or would show up as a neutral spine in the body. Because the neutral spine is what dynamically makes the body's ability to make most efficient usage of itself. But just because you know that's the target doesn't mean that's where you want to get to, or that's the way you get to the target, is by insisting on one way or the highway. That's where it gets to be like camps, and that becomes an intellectualization beyond what I care about as an instructor. So there I am with a person just met, sitting on the end of the Cadillac, holding on to the roll-down bar. They're in control, they're like they're driving a car. And I say roll down and roll up. And that either works or it doesn't with that few words. But when you say words that make sense, when I say words that make sense to me, that make no sense to my student at all, which happens, a lot. Not a lot maybe, but that's what you're reaching across is your words and your instructions to do what? To deliver a sensation. And when I say curl under in your hips until your lower back or until your sacrum is flat, and your lower back is flat, and your whole back is flat. Well, a lot of times people don't know where that is. So depending upon your studio and your waivers and what's legal within your interaction of cueing a student, tactily in some way letting them know where their sacrum is and reaching for a sensation of flat there, that goes off into the whole deal about the spine corrector. Why is that piece of apparatus called the spine corrector? Because it lifts up from flat to make contact in your lower back that is sensational, that allows you to gain control of your spine and how it interacts with your hips. What was that? what is this? It's a rope, right? And it's like this. And then what is this? This is a whip, and it's tapered. Okay, so there's taper in the two. And one has the end of a rope is the same throughout, and the end of a whip has a handle on it. And that handle is attached to the rest of the weave of the whip. Okay? Rigidity, and then the suppleness of the whip. So I take the whip and I show it down across my back to show that I'll probably regret demonstrating that, but it's important to recognize that the skeletal structure has the pelvis as the hand on the whip of the spine. How do we get off on it? And so you'd think it is still the Dark Ages. It's the Dark Ages in 2019 because nobody really is ready to or has learned and accepts that the hips have a grip at the hips, and that is the core, and then you have to leap into the other rotational dynamics within the body. So what matters to me is control when it comes to flat or neutral, and where the student is coming from. And all I'm trying to do is make a discernment in the beginning that they can feel. Now, neutral spine is way sophisticated in terms of how you're using your muscles in order to hold a position in space, because there's no exterior tactile interaction or reference point. As soon as you can make a sensation that a student can discern, then you're on the way toward control. As soon as you really... Another instance is... I'm all full of demos. When do you Indian wrestle with someone? You know, you do this with somebody else. And then you wrestle by trying to make your opponent have a broken wrist and you have a strong wrist. The very same thing, the same facts, the same biology is in play at the hips. And a tuck completely under into a flat spine isn't as strong and as dynamic as being able to engage a neutral spine with a well-engaged shoulders and the rest of the body. How can you even talk about flat or neutral when you fail to even acknowledge the underlying physics that the biology is accomplishing? The biology accomplishes the physics. And if you want to survive as a Pilates instructor, you got to do more than just go to Body World and look at cadavers. It's more than you got to look at. You have to understand you have to appreciate. You don't have to understand it all. But if you're learn that this is how the body engages itself, and it efficiently distributes the load of the body, which is what you're after when you're performing Pilates. Contrology develops the body uniformly. You want to develop the body uniformly. I gotta move on. So 3, 5 camps, controls. Oh, and so in that workshop with those different camps, all wanting to know which way is the right way, the way I dealt with it is by falling back, like I said, on Joe's definition of his method, contrology, control. And so rather than locking one way into being right and another way being wrong, which one gives you the best control when? See, it's not just what's the best way you want to end up, but how fast can you get to that best way? And I would probably say that I'm inclined to help a person recognize what's so sensationally apparent in their body, from like being in a flat spine or knowing what your sacrum anchored feels like in whatever arena or setup you want to talk about. But make the distinction sensational. Because from there then you can say, well, more of that or less of that. So, in closing, I would say, know your target. Know your target. What is your target? The complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. Not someday, not after you've been a dutiful provider of income, but right now. Let's have the experience now. And then let's get better at engaging in that experience through the performance of the poem. And when trying to discern between this way versus that way, between different camps, walk freely among them, knowing that usually the camps exist for good reasons, or at least because of coagulation, and that you can make use of whatever is available in any camp to achieve what you're after, which is control. And I just said complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. Yes, contrology is. And it does it this way. And because of the nature of the word control, and just it's the name, see, return to life. You return to life through control. It's like, come back to wherever you've been. That is a limitation to living pain-free, as well as more fully. You're pain-free, but you still want to jump higher, move faster, be more present. By pursuing an ideal expression as controlled as you can possibly make it, by the very nature of its definition. Embodiment of the definition, the experience, is the ultimate authority. Pursue it while you can, share it while you can, because life can't live forever. Read between the lines and see behind the curtain and add two and two and connect the dots while you evaluate points of view. And then add two and two, I think I said already. Direct your thinking. Geist